The private license recently awarded by the OFAC to Chevron has provided controversy because the Department of Treasury simultaneously provided a political definition for Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. However, it looks like the carrot is the license and the stick is the definition awarded to President Maduro. Everyone is acting cautiously, and Chevron is not commenting much publicly, probably because it is right now concentrated in developing its newly found relationship with ExxonMobil regarding Stabroek joint venture in Guyana. We must also remember that ExxonMobil used to work at Cerro Negro, also known as Carabobo Orinoco Belt Field, and its investment was expropriated by former President Hugo Chavez, which led to ExxonMobil's embracement of Guyana. However, Cerro Negro, Hamaca, Suata, and Machete are well known Orinoco fields in need of investment, to which Eni, Repsol, Chevron are already working, and ExxonMobil would probably like to return if conditions become more favorable. And since ExxonMobil and Chevron are already learning how to work together in Stabroek, the next step should be building the Avanza refinery in Essequibo, probably in Pomeroon, Sumeram, Atlantic coast. This would provide an opportunity for Guyana to hold the juiciest part of oil business, which is refining and upgrading crude, instead of just selling it directly from offshore into the international community. The new Essequibo refinery would be suitable for the needs of Orinoco Belt fields in Venezuela, which would be linked by pipelines to decongest Puerto La Cruz, El Palito, and the new Carabobo upgrader. The amount of production that we can foster is enormous and requires refineries all over Venezuela and Guyana. There was also noise that ExxonMobil left other ventures in Guyana to only concentrate in Stabroek. That should not be considered a flag. It's just a recomposition of business, and Guyana will probably award those concessions to other petroleum companies. Hopefully PDVSA will become more solvent and more reputable with all this investment that it's receiving from Chinese, Vietnamese, Spanish, Italian, French, Indian, and Russian oil interests, and PDVSA could also enter the profitable Guyana oil industry, and the Guyanese can start refining Venezuelan oil. The more we concentrate in fostering the wonders of economies of scale and Latin American and Caribbean integration through harmonious relationships between Venezuela and Guyana through a combined Essequibo refinery facility, the less important will become the border disputes. The Geneva Agreement of 1966 already provides for joint economical exploitation of Essequibo. So the legal framework is there, we just need some political agreements between Nicolas Maduro and Irfan Ali, or the next president of Guyana, who will be known on September 1st. And of course, additional investment in Trinidad and Tobago, mostly by Shell, could also benefit from a new refinery in Essequibo, enhancing Trinidad and Tobago's traditional role in functioning as a reasonable neighbor of often infighting Guyanese and Venezuelans. Of course, building a pipeline between the Orinoco Belt and the Essequibo refinery would require an additional bridge over the Orinoco and perhaps rivers over Cuyuní or Mazaruni or any of their tributaries, as well as the roads, which would also develop tourism for the benefit of Warao communities, and educational opportunities besides on-the-job training for petroleum industry jobs would also concentrate on language learning so that Guyanese learn Spanish and Venezuelans learn English. Venezuelans recently elected their mayors in municipalities, and I was surprised that there were no elections of mayors in the municipalities of Barima Huayni, Pomerum Supenam, Cuyuní Mazaruni, and Potaro Upper Essequibo, among others. I was absolutely displeased when I heard Diosdado Cabello mentioning that there were no elections for those municipalities with the excuse that the territory was not divided into municipalities, when we all know those municipalities, or regions as they are called in Guyana, already exist. Therefore, at this time, I do not agree with the lack of precision in the handling of Venezuelan claims for the state of Guayana Essequiba. If Venezuela intends to exert power over Guayana Essequiba municipalities, or in Guyana's language, Western regions, the existing names and regional borders should be respected. Because of course, Essequibo, that is what Venezuela considers the 24th state, is too big to only consist in one municipality. These imprecisions do not help the Venezuelan cause. We recently elected a National Assembly that should also address a similar situation that happens in the Federal District of Caracas and in Vargas State, recently renamed La Guaira. Caracas is the federal district and is divided into parishes, and the idea is to combine some of the parishes into new municipalities. That has not been done yet. Vargas also has many parishes, and they should be combined in 3 or 4 municipalities. La Guaira, Maiquetía, Naiguatá, and Catialamar, perhaps. Caracas could also be Northwest Caracas, Northeast Caracas, Southwest Caracas, Southeast Caracas. Of course, using names like El Recreo, El Paraíso, Catia, the most populous parishes. So my personal preference at this time regarding the Essequibo dispute is to continue using the Guyana assignments for regions, because Venezuela did not care to organize municipal elections for such municipalities. I voted on the December 2023 referendum to disregard International Court of Justice verdict on the Essequibo dispute. I still don't like much the idea, but I recognize that if I am proposing a refinery, that must be built according to thousands of international law details, and perhaps it will be better just to abide, because the economic interest of both Venezuela and Guyana should prevail over a territorial dispute in which none of the two countries have done enough for the populations of what in Guyana are called regions, and in Venezuela has not been defined as municipalities, better known as Estado Guayana Essequiba. Conducting business with this uncertainty is obviously a mess. It will be necessary that the populations of Guyana and Venezuela who want economic development start talking to each other and see how a common refinery in the Essequibo, specifically in Pomeroon Supernam Region 2, would be beneficial for both countries. It is true that Guyana's stabroic oil is light and needs few refining, but still it could be used for the production of gasoline or kerosene for export to Kourou space station in French Guyana. It would be wise for Guyana to invest in upgraders and pipelines, not only in extracting pure crude. And of course, downstream jobs would be created. And Venezuela definitely needs to diversify, because Venezuela has too much oil, which should be developed as we compete with other countries with higher costs. And as the price of oil might not go up too much, it could actually decline. We should be prepared to increase our production so that we can secure some revenue, and also bring more costly producers in other continents out of business. And there is also the question on ExxonMobil, if they would be interested in coming back to Venezuela after the resentment for having been expropriated. It is my personal opinion that Nicolás Maduro is a better president than what was Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez's expropriation of ExxonMobil was a very bad move. Carabobo field has been very difficult to operate. Cerro Negro investment by ExxonMobil was substantial, and probably a lot will need to be reinvested because previous historical decisions were bad and wasteful. Wasteful for the environment, wasteful for our finances, wasteful for our political inclusion. But perhaps if Chevron and ExxonMobil develop a harmonious relationship on Stabroek and the Essequibo refinery is supported by PDVSA and Guyanese oil companies, and pipelines come from Orinoco Belt, of course Chevron and ExxonMobil will cooperate even more. It would be interesting to see if ExxonMobil and Chevron will continue being antagonistic competitors in the United States and most countries around the world, but will work in harmonious partnership in both Guyana and Venezuela. That would be a hilarious example on careful and strategic diversification of interests. In the meantime, we must still be very cautious as information is not complete. I would like to thank Tammy Bruce from the Department of State. She is an excellent spokeswoman and she is very precise in translating the horrendous Marco Rubio statements that provide no trust in mostly any country. Tammy Bruce stated that there are two details, and she was probably referring to OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control, that she was not sure as they are secret, but she promised to get back to us and explain to us what those two details are. So we should be patient, as Tammy Bruce will probably explain a little more. Tammy Bruce is probably aware that Chevron has joint ventures such as Petroindependencia, Petroindependiente, Petropiar, and Petroboscan with PDVSA, which are Venezuelan companies. Their accounting is in Venezuelan bolivars, and transactions are legally conducted in bolivars. It will be very hard for either the Department of State or OFAC, and probably the reason why they are not publishing the license is because they are aware of this contradiction, because if Chevron owns a part of Petropiar, usually 40%, Petroindependencia, Petroindependiente, and Petroboscan, it legally can conduct Venezuelan business using the Bolivar currency because it has a special license allowing it to do so. So when we hear the rhetoric of Marco Rubio that no oil money will be transacted into Venezuela, which Tammy Bruce had to repeat in haste. Notice that in Tammy Bruce's press conference, she went extensively in oil details of Gaza because those are easier to explain. The carrot and stick strategy of the United States with Chevron, Venezuela, and Nicolas Maduro is so contradictory that they don't know how to legally frame it, and of course they are not willing to publish it. But it exists. I am recording this show with full confidence because yesterday Reuters reported as a fact that such private license for Chevron exists, and usually when Reuters publishes something, it has been already confirmed. Reuters usually doesn't mess up these sensitive matters. It is necessary that Venezuela and Guyana get along. When a Guyanese speaks about Essequibo being a part of Guyana, a Venezuelan must place ourselves on the shoes of the Guyanese and remember that, of course, you have to fight for your country. And similarly, when a Venezuelan speaks that Guayana Essequibo is Venezuelan, a Guyanese must understand that Venezuelans are supposed to speak like that. And then we must further recognize that we own great territories in the Guyana Shield, South America, and we wish the riches to support our population in both Caracas, Ana Regina, Eterimban, and Georgetown, and also Lethem if we want to consider a relationship with Brazil. Another interesting regional development for further uniting our countries would be with the Potiguar fields in northeastern Brazil, next to Natal in Rio Grande do Norte. That would involve a very long pipeline that could provide excellent access of South American petroleum into the African markets. Natal could be a major Brazil destination close to Georgetown and Caracas for our access into Senegal and Nigeria. South American countries must learn how to live together and how to minimize historical border disputes. We need an outcome on the Essequibo border dispute that is acceptable for all parties and enabling preferential access for both countries into the disputed region. We have the example of Belgium and the Netherlands, where they don't have any border controls and they have historically been linked together for trade, respecting municipal differences. However, sovereignty is always an issue because the United Nations has the system of one country, one vote, and so many islands are countries, especially in Oceania and the Caribbean, with very low population, but still they have one vote, as if they were Brazil, South Africa, or any other large country. So the only way that Essequibo could satisfy maximum ambitions of Venezuela and Guyana is if Venezuela and Guyana are fused into the same country. But then we would have the fight of where would be the capital, Georgetown or Caracas. Colombia and Venezuela already know this very well, and also Ecuador, because Quito and Caracas did not want to be ruled by Bogota. It seems that border disputes are actually disputes between capital cities that want to be more important than other capital cities. But then, an inhabitant of Pasto or Ipiales in Colombia or of Ibarra in Ecuador, they conduct business with each other because they are close by. But then they must be subject to Quito or Bogota. And probably with the Guyanas is the same thing. Paramaribo, Cayenne, and Georgetown, they all fight for regions that they want to control. And the more countries decentralized, the less important become the capitals. So border disputes also become a little bit more irrelevant. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I invite you to subscribe to this channel, and we will continue researching deeply on strong innovative ideas to promote Avanza South American integration, energy, and road communication projects.